Good day, everyone, and welcome to our ProTraining technical webinar featuring Heather Patterson from CSI. Before we start, I'd like to review a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. Here's a quick review of what you'll see on your screen. To the left of your screen is the viewer, where you see the presentation. To the right is the control panel, where you can ask questions. The control panel will collapse automatically when not in use. To keep it open, click the View menu and uncheck Auto Hide Control Panel. You have joined this webinar in listen-only mode, which means you are muted. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. And you may send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end. Also via the control panel, you can download resource documents our presenter provided by going to the Handouts pane anytime during the webinar. Later today, you will receive a follow-up email containing the webinar recording. With that, let me go ahead and introduce you to today's speaker. Heather Patterson joined the product development team at Control Solutions in 2017 as project manager following graduation from the University of Florida, where she obtained her MS in entomology. In 2021, she transitioned to technical services manager, where she currently supports research and development activities, works with university researchers and industry cooperators to test new formulations, and builds data packages for new product registrations. She also supports the sales team and the pest management industry with presentations and trainings on behalf of CSI. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Heather.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Patterson, Technical Service with Control Solutions, Inc. As you heard, I've been part of the product development team for 7 years now, and we're a product manufacturer located outside of Houston, and that's where I'm joining you today from. And so I just wanted to show my face and say hello, but I'm going to turn off my webcam and then jump into my presentation mode on my slide here and kick things off. So thank you again to Veseris for having me here today to talk with you guys about cockroach and small fly control and management with Tekko technology. And so the goal of today's presentation is to talk a little bit about cockroach and small fly biology and behavior, why they're important to control, why they're considered public health pests. And then towards the end of the presentation, we'll dig into the Tekko family of products, the IGRs that we offer here at CSI, that you can use to incorporate into your services when you're facing cockroach and small fly infestations. So as you all are well aware, cockroaches and flies together are among some of the most common and abundant insects and pests that we face in our industry, in our jobs, in urban and structural pest management. They are considered together to be some of the most successful groups of animals, and they are both extremely adaptable organisms. In some cases, some species have successfully adjusted to living right alongside humans. Now, we have about 4,500 species of cockroaches that do exist worldwide, with about 55-ish, 60-ish that are found here in the United States. Now, luckily, only a few, just a small handful, excuse me, of cockroaches here in the US are actually considered and classified as pest species. And there's surprisingly significantly more fly species. That number is somewhere around 120,000 as compared to the 4,500 cockroach species that I mentioned. Now, additionally, there are several notorious species of both fly and cockroach that are classified as public health pests, and we're going to spend a little bit of time today discussing who those players are. And that's important to mention because much of what we do as PMPs, as pest management professionals, is defending and upholding and protecting public health. Now, there's a considerable number of public health pests in addition to some cockroach and fly species that we do encounter, that we face on a regular basis, that we're tasked to manage in our jobs. And so we're going to briefly discuss the parameters of what defines a public health pest here in these next couple of slides. Now, under federal pesticide law, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is required to identify pests of significant health importance. And there's actually a list that the EPA puts together, and we're going to take a look at that list here soon. Anything that is deemed as a significant public health pest is going to be treated quite a bit differently than non-public health pests at the EPA. And essentially what I mean by that is we CSI as a product manufacturer, if we want to register a new or novel formulation and we submit that to the EPA with a label that says it kills and controls public health pests, the EPA is going to require that there is efficacy data that shows that this formulation actually works to kill and control each of those listed public health pests, that it actually does what it says it can do. We can't simply claim that it kills mosquitoes or cockroaches or controls bed bugs without having that data to back that up, without having put that product to the test. So additionally, the EPA also has these guidelines, the stringent requirements and standards for how those tests are expected to be conducted. This is how it's going to be done. This is how it's going to be tested if you want us to approve these public health pests on your products. So hopefully that helps to embolden consumer confidence in the products that you decide to purchase. Now, that list is not stagnant. It is expected to change. And as new science emerges and as new discoveries are made, that list is expected and will be updated. So if you hop online and you go to the EPA's website and check out the site that they have for the list of pests of significant public health importance, you'll go to this page and you can get some information about why this list exists. Also, a brief description about some of those identified pests or groups of pests, categories of pests, and an explanation for why each are designated as a public health pest of concern. You see a lot of organisms that you face on a daily basis, from cockroaches to ticks to bed bugs to rodents, shown here, and a little bit of an explanation for why they're a public health pest. But this is not the official list that the EPA puts together. You can access that list by coming to this website. I think if you scroll to the bottom of this page of their website, you can download their PDF, which is like a 20-page document that goes into the full list of arthropod, vertebrate, and microorganism public health pests. And those are the three primary categories that they have things organized in. Of course, arthropod pests include your insect pests, your arachnids that can cause direct harm or injury to humans. They can contaminate our food, and they can also vector disease-causing organisms and make us ill. Same with the arthropod pests. Of course, that includes infamously our rodents, the rats, the mice, the bats, squirrels, birds, and they're also associated with the similar things of the arthropod category, where they can too cause direct harm or injury to people. They can contaminate our food, and they can serve as amplifying hosts that perpetuate disease cycles. And then that third category is the microorganisms, which are the pathogens, the bacteria, the fungi, the viruses that actually make us ill. And so looking and talking about cockroaches and why they're important to control, beyond the fact that our customers find them disgusting, you can see that they are considered a public health pest here. So we know that this would fall into the arthropod pest category that I mentioned. Everything's organized by order, so cockroaches are in the order Blatodia, and we see 7 cockroaches that hopefully you recognize shown here. The common name, scientific name, and also that clinical significance for why they're important to manage. Now, of that small handful of cockroaches that are considered to be pests that are known to invade structures, we do have a way to group them. They typically get lumped into one of 2 cockroach categories. Those that live their entire lives inside our homes or buildings in close association with humans, they're found strictly in and completing their life cycles in our homes and structures. We call those domestic cockroaches. And then we have those that can be found indoors occasionally. They can be found both inside and outside. We call those peridomestic. And peridomestic cockroaches often move indoors when there's some kind of unfavorable weather condition outside that drives them indoors. And that can sometimes mean that it's too hot or too wet. It may be too dry or whatever that is bringing them inside. Other times it may be because outdoor populations are getting too large, and then you have some individuals that may be finding their way into structures looking for a new place to call home. We know that cockroaches in general can squeeze into really tight places. We've all seen the videos where they can kind of compress their bodies and squeeze them down and almost flat to get into the tiniest of cracks and crevices. And they can come in through areas with defunct door sweeps and other openings around the structure that we are all well trained to look for when we're conducting our inspections to determine how they're getting in. Now, there's a few domestic cockroach species that we could discuss, but here I'm going to mention two. One being, of course, the most notorious. Again, these domestic cockroaches are the ones that live inside and depend on human environments in order to survive. You've got German cockroaches, which is an extremely successful organism, and it's so successful for a number of reasons. One of the first reasons is the fact that these cockroaches do have a very large number of eggs and embryos per ootheca. And so each egg capsule contains a high number or a large number of developing cockroach babies. And they also, in addition to that, undergo the shortest time from egg hatch to sexual maturity. These two things together result in rapid population growth that we see with German cockroaches. A second reason they're so successful is that there is a greater number of nymph hatch that is successful because of that female carrying that ootheca, that egg capsule around during that entire time those embryos are developing within her egg. Some cockroach species, as you know, deposit their eggs in the environment, which leaves them vulnerable to potential injury or predation or desiccation or parasitism. But since that female German cockroach carries hers around, it gives her offspring the greatest chance at success and survival and viability. And the third reason German cockroaches are successful is because that they are smaller, considerably smaller than most other cockroach species, and can effectively conceal themselves into inaccessible places. And so these cockroaches are, of course, important to manage for many reasons. They have an economic impact to tourism, as well as the restaurant industries because of the unpleasant odors and unsightly fecal spots that they leave behind. And we also know that these guys love refrigerators. They have everything they need to thrive, right? Warmth, food, moisture from the drip pan. So they can become a big problem in kitchen areas because of that. The second common domestic species I want to mention is the brown-banded cockroach. Those are the two pictures on the right side here. These are similar in size as the German cockroach, but have some differentiating coloration and patterns. We all can pick out a German cockroach. We know to recognize those two dark parallel lines on the pronotum. And as the name suggests for the brown-banded, both the adults and nymphs can be distinguished by the two brownish broad bands across the body at the base of the abdomen. Now, brown-banded cockroaches prefer warm, dry locations near motor housings of equipment, on upper walls of cabinets, inside pantries, closets, dressers, and other pieces of furniture in general. May even be found behind picture frames, beneath tables and chairs, found inside things like clocks and radios, light switch panels, and may even be found hiding in places closer to the ceiling as opposed to the floor, further away from those water sources. Here I'm going to touch on a couple of the peridomestic cockroach species that you're probably familiar with. Of course, we got the American cockroach on the left here, the largest of the common urban species. This cockroach often becomes very abundant in city dumps, very common in basements, sewer lines, steam tunnels of restaurants, bakeries, and other facilities. Now, American cockroach adults, both male and female, do have functional wings and are capable of flying, albeit arguably not very well, but they can catch air. In the middle there, we have the Australian cockroach, which can be found all around the world. It does have a global distribution. Here in the United States, the largest populations of Australian cockroaches are going to be found in the South, in our southern states. They are sometimes found hanging out in places like tree trunks and piles of wood, water pipes, and other damp areas. And you can see, as far as appearance goes, it does look very similar to the American cockroach, but it can be extinguished by the presence of those light yellow bands on the upper margins of the forewing, and it has that characteristic Batman symbol on the pronotum. You can see that that pronotum pattern on the Australian cockroach is highly contrasting, almost yellow, yellow background with a dark brown or black pattern, whereas on the American cockroach, it's more like tans and brown coloration. And then the third picture on the right that is a smoky brown cockroach. They have this shiny, greasy appearance, and they have that brownish black or mahogany coloration. It's a bit smaller than the American and the Australian cockroach, but it's still a relatively large peridomestic species. Now, again, like what I said with the American, both male and female adults have wings, and they can use them fairly well, often observed flying down from high areas, trees, and other high places around the landscape. So what's the issue with cockroaches, right? People don't like them, right? Cockroaches have that ick factor that results in a very low tolerance for many people and many of our customers. But aside from that ick factor, we know that cockroaches are important to manage because they're a leading trigger for allergies and asthma attacks. The saliva they produce, the feces they excrete, and the shed body parts that they leave behind can trigger both asthma and allergies. These allergens are similar to dust mites, which can, that's one example of an allergen that can aggravate your symptoms when they're kicked up into the air and breathed in. One female cockroach can produce somewhere around 150 micrograms of allergens, making it quite a potent source. Now, in many cases with cockroach allergens, these symptoms can become chronic, meaning that they can last beyond the typical seasonal allergies. Allergies happen when our immune systems react to a foreign substance, and there's a lot of different foreign substances that can trigger this type of reaction. For some people, it's pollen. For other people, they may be allergic to bee venom or pet dander. Sometimes it's food, right? We all probably know somebody who has a food allergy of some type, whether that's peanuts or shellfish. And this may be something that causes a reaction in some people, but not for most. So our immune system produces a substance known as an antibody, and when we have allergies, our immune system makes those antibodies that identify a particular allergen as harmful, even though it may not be. So when you come into contact with that allergen, your immune system reaction can lead to reactions like inflamed skin, irritated and inflamed sinuses, airways, and even digestive system for some people. Another concern is asthma. If you have asthma, cockroach allergens could potentially cause an asthma attack. Asthma attack symptoms, of course, include tightness of chest, chest pain, or even pressure, coughing, shortness of breath, and wheezing. Now, asthma is a chronic condition that affects the airways in the lungs, and when somebody's experiencing an asthmatic reaction, those airways start to become inflamed and narrowed and restricted. You can see that very well in this diagram here of what a normal airway looks like compared to airways of somebody who may be experiencing an asthmatic reaction or an asthmatic attack. And so it restricts the airflow from the lungs when somebody's trying to breathe out. It's a arguably very common condition. CDC reports that 1 in 13 people in the United States do suffer from asthma, and there's various things that can trigger an asthma attack, and one of those could possibly be cockroach allergens. Now, cockroach allergies are a very common allergy. They're one of the most common indoor allergies in the world. And in fact, according to the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, cockroach droppings may be one of the more critical allergens in the indoor environment. And when you talk about indoor allergies in the indoor environment, these include things like dust mites, pet dander, and mold, which is very common in many people's homes. Now, we know that tens of millions of homes in the United States have cockroaches, have cockroach infestations, so it's no wonder that we see a high incident rate of people suffering from reactions to these allergens. One source says that 63% of homes in the US do contain cockroach allergens, and that jumps up to 78 to 98% of homes in urban areas specifically that do have cockroach allergens in them. So who's affected by cockroach allergens? Well, the answer is anybody. Anyone can have a cockroach allergy, but it does seem to affect children more than adults. According to the Cleveland Clinic, studies suggest that between 17 and 41% of people in the US do have cockroach allergies. And children that have asthma or a cockroach allergy, of course, experience the most respiratory issues. These can result in more missed days of school for the child, more ER visits, hospitalizations than children who aren't sensitive or exposed to cockroaches. And the thing to note here is on every clinical site that I visited when I first constructed this presentation last year was that the same remediation recommendation was mentioned and echoed from page to page. And that is the best way to prevent symptoms of a cockroach allergy reaction is to avoid and get rid of those cockroaches altogether. So the best recommendation is to call you, a PMP, to eliminate those populations, which is really important for reducing the need for medical intervention. Now, according to NPMA, in total, cockroaches are known to spread 33 kinds of bacteria, 6 types of parasitic worms, and 7 kinds of human pathogens. Now, there's a lot of research that's been done that looks at isolating and identifying the various microbes and pathogens that are being carried by cockroaches, so it's quite possible that this number may be quite beyond this. So, several observational studies on the various microbes carried by cockroaches have been carried out in various parts of the world. And this particular publication kind of assimilated all of those studies and created a full table of those various microorganisms and harmful pathogens, including bacteria, parasites, fungi, and viruses that have been found on cockroaches. And so this table does come from a study that evaluated the cockroach's role in foodborne illness. And approximately 1/4 of the microorganisms reported here are actually foodborne pathogens. Okay, so that was a little bit about cockroaches. I do want to move on to flies and discuss a little bit about why they're important to control. Of course, we know that flies are more than a nuisance, both in good and not so good ways. Flies effectively break down and recycle the nasty, the yucky organic gunk and feces and waste that most of us other organisms really aren't interested in. And because of that, they are very efficient decomposers and nutrient recyclers in the environment. They're doing the dirty work that most of us don't want to mess with. They are also very important as far as the food chain goes, being a food source for a whole host of animals. We can see this bird is snacking here on a crane fly. I don't know about where you're from, but I'm in the Houston area, and I feel like the crane flies have been really bad this past year. There's a lot of people here that think that these are actually very large mosquitoes, but you can differentiate crane flies from mosquitoes because they have different mouth parts. They don't have that piercing, sucking mouth part that mosquitoes have. So a lot of important differences between the two, but flies in general, important food source. And of course, the drawback to flies is that some can bite, some can take our blood, some can cause a huge economic loss or even agricultural damage. There's a lot of invasive species we're concerned about, and some are even implicated in the spread of disease-causing organisms, which those that fall into this category, of course, are considered pests. And similarly to what we looked at with the cockroaches, here's the fly section on the EPA's list of public health pests. You can see it's pretty healthy here, and we'll discuss some of the concerns associated with these organisms. From a public health perspective, the prominent issues associated with flies in general are due to the microorganisms that they can transmit to people and make us sick. Also, some flies can develop in the flesh. Now, maggots that do this, that live inside people's flesh, it's called myiasis, and it can happen to humans, and arguably the most infamous is the botfly. Here we're looking at a couple of pictures of the human botfly. These images come from the CDC. Very disturbing. And like we talked about with the cockroaches, we also like to put flies into their own group. We do that in general, right? We like to put things into groups and boxes and categories. And when it comes to flies, we typically put them into one of two groups. We've got the biting fly group and we've got the non-biting fly group. And the non-biting fly pests are also in many cases known as filth flies. And those are the ones that we are really interested in briefly discussing together here today. When we're talking about pathogens carried by flies, it's reported that over 100 pathogens that cause human diseases have been removed from filth flies. Another interesting quote from Malice reads that no animals except perhaps people themselves are responsible for greater loss of human life and economic loss than flies are. More than 50% of the world's population is directly affected by fly-borne pathogens and parasites. So in that respect, they are a concerning group of organisms, of course. Pathogens carried by flies, you can see the full list here. I showed you that table about the things that have been isolated off of cockroach bodies. Here's an example of some things that have been found on fly bodies. And it's important to mention that just because a pathogen or bacteria or virus or something has been recovered from a fly does not mean that that successful transmission is always possible. Now, good evidence does exist that flies do play a very important role in human illness caused by certain bacterial infections. However, there are several bacteria and viruses that can cause food poisoning, for instance, and a few of those top ones are on this list, as you can see: E. coli, salmonella, right? That said, probably the more common reason somebody gets sick with food poisoning is more likely from improper food handling, possibly not storing the food at proper temperatures, or something that has to do with handling and storage of the food we eat. But filth flies can in fact carry and transmit disease-causing pathogens through what is known as mechanical transmission. And mechanical transmission is different than how mosquitoes and ticks transmit disease, which happens through an infected bite as they feed on our blood. With these filth flies, it happens when one who was likely stomping around in an unsanitary place like a dumpster or a porta potty or on a pile of dog feces, it comes along and decides to stomp then all over your BLT, kindly sharing those yucky germs and microorganisms that could potentially make you sick. So they're called filth flies for a reason. We've got a couple of large filth flies that we're familiar with: blowflies, bottleflies, houseflies, soldier, and flesh flies. And the reason why they're called filth flies is if you take a look at these common breeding sites, and the breeding sites is where the larvae and the maggots are developing, right? This is the yucky organic stuff where these flies like to lay their eggs, that the maggots are developing and living in, include dead animals, decaying organic matter, garbage juice, rotting fruits and vegetables and animal matter. So that's why they're called filth flies. But small flies can also be filthy too. Various types of small flies that we're very familiar with, of course, fruit flies, phorids, moth flies, drain flies. They can also develop in pretty yucky areas as well: decaying organic matter, drains, garbage juice, rotting fruits and vegetables, sewage areas, that kind of thing. And where the larvae are, these maggots are developing, again, they're playing a really important role with nutrient recycling, but because they're living in these unsanitary places and they're spending time there, that's what the risk is for us, is when they end up sharing those germs with humans and crawling all over our food prep surfaces and such. There are countless examples of fly breeding sites that we could look at and talk about together. This is just one picture that I took at a bar and restaurant in Houston. I was at a table with some friends, and I noticed very quickly that there were small flies kind of buzzing around our drinks and our food. So I moseyed over to the bar, and I saw this behind the bar and snapped a picture. Where to start, right? First off, check out the liquor bottles, shamefully covered by those bar cups, admitting to the fly problem that they have at hand. Now, when liquor bottles with pour spouts are left uncovered, the smell of that fermentation can be very attractive to fruit flies. And if you see pour spouts are being used on bottles, you can make the recommendation for them to buy spout caps or screened top pourers. Otherwise, these flies could actually crawl inside the bottle and lay eggs and contaminate the product. So those caps and covers and cups and other devices like that can help keep those flies out so they don't spoil the product. You can actually get online and read like Reddit threads and Quora threads of bartenders and people who share stories about their boss making them strain flies out of alcohol on a regular basis and put the liquor back in the bottles. So when they're serving Bob an old fashioned, there's no fruit flies floating in there. So not only are these liquor bottles a problem, of course, but just look at all the moisture, all that water that has collected and is sitting on the floor. Now, this was not an outdoor bar. This was a bar and restaurant that had kind of those garage door style roll-up doors on 3 of the 4 sides. So it did have a lot of natural airflow, and there was a lot of fans to help reduce fly pressure and fly activity in there. But of course, this is very easy to see how saturated it got inside this indoor bar and restaurant. There were lemons and limes and wet rags that you can see kind of stuffed underneath that three-tiered table on the left there, spilled sugary drinks and ice and bottle caps and trash scattered all over the floor. So of course we have major sanitation concerns with breeding sites galore. Now this was an area, of course, chock full of organic matter that's seeping into and filling those cracks and crevices in the concrete. So many places that maggots would be happy to grow in. What about those beer troughs? How often do you think those get cleaned? I went to another local bar and restaurant here in Texas on an after hours call to help with a small fly problem. And I peeked inside one of these, just like this. There was no beer in it, no ice, just a small bit of room temperature water and some sludge that was coating the walls of the trough, along with things like cocktail garnish, mint leaves, lemons, bits and pieces of shrimp, and other food bits just kind of marinating in this trough juice as well. Arguably a pretty attractive spot for flies that are looking for a juicy place to lay some eggs. So aside from those things that we see here, we know that there are other places in a restaurant that flies are going to thrive in, right? Grease traps. Dirty drains, when they're pushing around the water and the stuff on the floor and shoving it back to the drain area, not everything goes down the drain and it just kind of piles up near there, and it ends up being a really good site and place for flies to breed. Produce pantries, mop closets with damp mop heads that aren't allowed to effectively dry, dump sinks. I mean, the list really goes on, and as PMPs, it's our jobs to be the detectives to find the things that our customers potentially overlook, to find exactly where the flies are coming from. So in this next section, we're going to talk about some insect growth regulator products that are really handy to have when facing situations like this, because we know when we're dealing with small flies in a kitchen, it's really, really important. It's essential that we find the source of the activity, right? We can kill adult flies left and right all day long, but the problem is likely to continue until we find out where those maggots are coming from, where the larvae are developing. And that could be a really challenging aspect about fly control. Happened to me not long ago where I had a small fly problem in my own kitchen and I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. I was pulling out the appliances to see if, did something roll behind the stove or the roll behind my refrigerator and was decomposing back there. And so I was on my hands and knees trying to find out where these flies were coming from. And it wasn't until I got the step stool out and I looked on the very top shelf of my pantry, and there was a single runaway small baby red potato. And that was ground zero for the fly problem that I was facing. And it wasn't until I threw that thing away that I had any results. So let's take a look at 3 of our insect growth regulator products, which are great tools to add into your cockroach and small fly management services. We've got Tekko Pro, we've got Tekko Trio Concentrate, and then we also have Tekko Trio Foam. Now, all 3 of these are combination chemistry products, and it's common practice for PMPs to tank mix multiple products to get the added benefit of multiple modes of action in a single application. And here at CSI, we are proud to offer unique combinations and novel formulations for PMPs to use existing active ingredients in new ways to help combat resistance development. All 3 of these products do contain novaluron and pyriproxyfen at different concentrations. 1.3 for both of those in Tekko Pro, bumps up to 2.6 for both in Tekko Trio Concentrate, which also has the addition of 9% hydroprene. And those are the same 3 actives in Tekko Trio Foam, but since that's a ready-to-use product, it contains those end-use dilutions and levels of 0.02% Nova and pyriproxyfen and 0.36% hydroprene. Now, all 3 of these are non-repellent active ingredients that are compatible with non-repellent and repellent pest control programs and mixtures. So we're going to take a couple of slides to get everyone on the same page and familiar with IGRs, insect growth regulators. They are active ingredients that disrupt the normal life cycle and development of insects. IGRs largely target those immature stages or those development points, which are the growth points between an egg and adult. It includes the larvae, the pupae, the nymphal individuals in the population. And in most cases, adults that are exposed to IGRs do end up going on to live out their normal lives. And the goal with IGRs is to prevent those juvenile insects in the population from reaching the adult stage. If they can't develop into healthy adults, they can't breed, they can't contribute to population growth. Ultimately, exposure to IGRs help to prevent eggs from hatching, they work to prevent larvae from molting, or if they do end up reaching the adult stage, they have major deformities that negatively impact their ability to survive, to breed, and to lay viable eggs. Now, insects do depend on various specific processes and hormone signaling to complete growth functions properly. Life processes that are unique to insects include metamorphosis and molting, and the IGRs that we use are interfering with these development points and processes that insects experience. As a quick refresher, metamorphosis, of course, is the change in form that we see in insects as they go from egg to adult. Some pests that we face are holometabolous or have complete metamorphosis, like the butterfly life cycle that we've seen 100 times that we see here on the left. These insects progress from egg to larvae, or it could be grub or caterpillar or maggot. And then from there, they proceed to the pupal stage. And the pupal stage is that really dramatic transformative stage where they change from maggot or grub or caterpillar into the adult form, which looks dramatically different from one to the other. Now, pests that follow this path include flies and fleas and mosquitoes and stored product beetles, to name a few. Other pests that we face, that includes bed bugs and cockroaches, for instance, they follow the path that we see here on the right, which is incomplete metamorphosis or gradual metamorphosis. And the nymphs that hatch from those eggs look like a very similar, smaller version of the adult stage. And there's a specific hormonal signaling, of course, that they depend on in order to progress to that next stage properly. And that's what we're interfering with the use of IGRs. All insects molt as they grow, and they molt multiple times until they reach that adult stage. Now, molting is when they outgrow their old exoskeletons and they have to make a new one as they shed that old one off. And this is a very vulnerable place to be. We've all seen the white cockroaches, the albino cockroaches in a population. That's just a freshly molted cockroach that hasn't sclerotized or hardened its exoskeleton. And so it's a vulnerable place to be because for many insects, they stop eating, they're very still, they're trying not to move because they're very susceptible to injury or pathogens or predation during this period. Some researchers at North Carolina State University even found that they temporarily stopped breathing during the molting process as well. And when they slip out of their old exoskeleton, it's not as simple as just like taking off a shirt, right? Or unzipping a jacket. There's internal structures that get shed along with the exterior exoskeleton, like parts of their digestive system and respiratory system. The lining of the tracheals actually come out with it too. And so if you've ever inspected like even a cicada exuvie, you can see that there's like kind of these white stringy things in there. There's like internal structures that ended up getting shed with the outside skin. Now, this is a developmental event that extends beyond insects. All arthropods have exoskeletons that require a molting event to grow. So what are the common IGRs that we use to manage pests that affect these two life processes that I mentioned, right? Metamorphosis and molting. Well, they typically get split into two major IGR groups. We've got the juvenile hormone analogs or juvenile hormone mimics, and then group 2 is the chitin synthesis inhibitors. But according to the IRAC chart, there's technically 3 groups that affect insect growth and development. And if you're not familiar with IRAC, that stands for the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee, and they group active ingredients based on their mode of action to help pest management applicators make good decisions when it comes to pesticide rotation, right? If you're not getting the results that you expect to get with product A, well, knowing what group the active ingredients are in with product A, you can make a better decision about what to rotate to and avoid using something that has those same groups of active ingredients in your next product. And in the case of IGRs, looking here, group 7 contains the juvenile hormone mimics, group 15 and 16 contain those chitin synthesis inhibitors, and then we have group 18, which is the ecdysone receptor agonists. So let's take a look at the IRAC groups listed here for Tekko Trio concentrate as an example. Now, many of our labels have a table like the one pictured here that reports the IREC group for each of the active ingredients in that product. You can see that Tekko Trio contains hydroprene, which belongs to group 7A, novaluron in group 15, and pyriproxyfen in group 7. And even though pyriproxyfen and hydroprene are both group 7 active ingredients, there are some notable differences between the two, and that's why they end up getting put into their own subgroup. Now, one of the main differences is the fact that hydroprene is known to be volatile, and it can penetrate deep into voids and cracks and crevices to affect pests you can't see in those difficult to reach or inaccessible places around the treatment area, making it one of the advantages of using that particular active ingredient. Now, when you look up the IRAC PDF, you can see that all the different groups, what all those different groups are, and then also what target site those groups affect, and what active ingredients are listed together in that group. And so Tekko Trio does have a group 15 benzoylurea active ingredient, which is classified as a chitin synthesis inhibitor. So we see novaluron listed there on the right. In addition to that, we see other ones that we probably recognize like novaflumaron and hexaflumaron, diflubenzuron. Some of these are very common, especially in termite bait stations. Then in group number 7, the juvenile hormone mimics, we see those 3 different subgroups that I mentioned. Hydroprene is in 7A and pyriproxyfen is in 7C, and they interfere with that normal hormonal signaling in insects that tell the insect when it's time to start developing those adult features. So these are the IGR groups that we'll focus on. The ones most commonly used in pest management, we've got the chitin synthesis inhibitors and juvenile hormone mimics, which are found in Tekko Pro, Tekko Trio Concentrate, and Tekko Trio Foam. Chitin synthesis inhibitors like novaluron disrupt the molting process by preventing the formation of chitin, which is a critical structural component of their exoskeleton. If they can't properly form their exoskeletons, they often die during that molting event, resulting in what we call an abortive molt. And this prevents them from reaching the adult stage. Now, juvenile hormone mimics interfere with normal hormone signaling, as I mentioned, and exposure to these types of IGRs, like pyriproxyfen, result in significant abnormalities, reproductive issues, and even death. So here's a couple of examples of how chitin synthesis inhibitors work against key pests in our business. There's a lot of science and evidence that shows their effects against things like termites and fleas and flies, cockroaches, to name a few. And exposure to these IGRs have resulted in reproductive inhibition, inviable eggs that can't hatch, and abortive molts, like what we see pictured here with these cockroaches. These cockroaches have been treated with our Tekko products, and they died while trying to get out of their old exoskeleton. Products that contain juvenile hormone analogs are critical tools for controlling various pests, including mosquitoes and cockroaches. These IGRs impact egg production, result in abnormalities and deformities that affect survival and reproduction, and other developmental issues for exposed insects. It's not uncommon for us to observe the twisted wing effect after using pyriproxyfen, like what we see pictured here. The wings and reproductive organs, like ovaries in females, the adiagus, which is the male structure in males, are those adult features that get deformed after exposure to these types of IGRs. This is a female that was exposed to pyriproxyfen before molting into her adult form. You can see she has twisted forewings and hindwings, and she's also carrying around this deflated abnormal ootheca that is likely inviable. Now, in addition to what we saw with the abortive molts and twisted wings and reproductive deformities in cockroaches, these active ingredients have also demonstrated effects to ticks as well. Unsuccessful molting pictured on the left, and then on the right are IGR exposed females that were able to lay eggs and died naturally. However, all the eggs in her clutch failed to hatch. They were inviable. Flies exposed to these IGRs also had twisted wings. The ones that did emerge from their pupal case did not emerge effectively. They have those twisted wings and other issues, and then many of them died in that pupal stage and did not emerge whatsoever. As far as labeled pests go, Tekko Trio Concentrate arguably has the most comprehensive list, followed by Tekko Pro. We see fewer pests are found on the Tekko Trio foam label, but that has what it needs for how that product is intended and positioned to be used. With the key 3 pests in commercial kitchens, you got cockroaches, drain flies, fruit flies, and other small fly species that can breed in food handling areas and drains, where this comes in as an excellent treatment option. So quickly, here are some of the features and benefits of Tekko Pro. As I mentioned, it does contain those 2 IGRs, the chitin synthesis inhibitor and juvenile hormone mimic, with those 2 unique modes of action, making it a great insecticide resistance management tool. It does have a flexible label for indoor use, including food handling, as well as outdoor use. It can be used alone or in combination with other insecticide products and adulticides. Now, using Tekko Pro will effectively break the life cycle and works to stop that development of the next generation. So, great addition to somebody's pest management service for sure. Very similar advantages with the Tekko Trio line. However, since it does contain 3 active ingredients, it does bring the power of hydroprene to the table, which is known for its unique ability to translocate or move, which provides effective control to targeted insects without having to be applied directly to them for exposure. So it's a great choice with flexible applications for managing tough populations indoors. This is for indoor use only. Tough populations like cockroaches. A good cockroach control strategy does depend on effective residual control options, because you can't directly hit all of the cockroaches in the population. So adding Tekko Trio to the service can really go a long way. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention. I think it's probably a good time for us to maybe take a couple questions.
Heather, thank you for presenting such great informative information. We'll now start answering some of the questions that have come in. And remember, folks, you can still go ahead and enter your questions via the chat or questions pane. But here we go. As the first question is asking, what kind of residual control do the Tekko products provide?
Yeah, this is a good question. So the 3 Tekko products provide very effective long-term residual control. These IGRs are long-lasting formulations, and they work to inhibit reinfestation for pests like cockroaches and fleas as well, for months following application. So that's one of the advantages, many advantages of these types of products.
Thanks, Heather. This next question is asking, can the Tekko products be used in food handling? And what about while it's in operation?
So yes, these products are labeled for use in food handling establishments, and they have instructions for applications in food serving areas as well as non-food areas. So applications can be made while the facility is in operation as spot and crack and crevice treatments, but it's important that exposed food is removed or covered prior to those applications.
Great. Someone is asking if we can get a recording of the call, and yes, you will receive an email later this afternoon that contains the recording. So thanks for the question. Heather, here's one that's asking, do you have any suggestions on sensitive areas such as a nursing home or hospice?
Yeah, these are really good options in those sensitive accounts. I do believe that you can find those sites on the labels that I mentioned here: Tekko Trio, Tekko Pro, and Tekko Trio Foam. IGRs are good options in those instances to use for sensitive accounts, whether it's daycares or hospitals, nursing homes, places like that, for sure.
Got it. And then this next question is asking, are these labeled for bed bugs?
No, they're besides Tekko Trio. Besides the Tekko Trio products, those do have bed bugs because of the addition of hydroprene, but Tekko Pro does not have bed bugs. I'm sorry if I didn't stay too long on that pest slide, but I think that was also on there. Yes. So no for Tekko Pro Concentrate, yes for the Tekko Trio products. Good question.
Yeah. Here's one asking, is it really worth switching from Tekko Pro to Tekko Trio? I get lots of small flies in my restaurants and kitchens.
So I guess it depends on where you find yourself making your applications and what the need is. Tekko Trio does bring the advantage of hydroprene, as I mentioned, and since it's for indoor use only, that is one potential limitation, but it really is effective in those commercial kitchen areas. Treating drains even does have drain language. Tekko Pro does bring you the flexibility of allowing for indoor and outdoor application. So it depends on what you're using it for and what your needs are.
All right, the next question is, we encounter a lot of German roaches. Is Tekko Trio better to use than Tekko Pro? And can Tekko Trio be mixed with other insecticides?
There is tank mixing directions and instructions on those labels if that's something that you'd like to do. Very common for people to add IGRs like these to adulticide. So the adulticide gives you that quick knockdown and the initial control of the population and the adults there, while the IGRs and these Tekko products do provide you that residual that we talked about that will continue to break the insect's life cycle. So yeah, definitely good options to consider for tank mixing. What was the first part of that question again, Chris?
They said we encounter a lot of German roaches.
Okay.
So yeah, is Tekko Trio better to use than Tekko Pro?
They're both really good products with good claims for German cockroaches and German cockroach control. Again, the advantage with the Tekko Trio is that hydroprene, which can move into those difficult to reach areas, since it does translocate and affect other parts of the population that extend beyond where the actual treatment was done. So that was a good question.
Boy, there's lots here. There's a couple more for you, Heather. One's asking, does Tekko Pro stop the flea eggs from hatching after contact is made to the egg to keep it from hatching? Or does it affect the egg through, hold on, let me spread. My screen's a little small here.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, hold on, let's see. Or does it affect the egg through the flea when the flea is laying the egg?
Sorry, would you mind repeating that question?
No, let me start over. So does Tekko Pro stop the flea eggs from hatching after contact is made to the egg to keep it from hatching? Or does it affect the egg through the flea when the flea is laying the egg?
So we do know that there are some studies that show reproductive inhibition to various pests. With fleas, we do know that flea eggs that are treated directly do fail to hatch.
Okay. Does Tekko Trio list fruit flies?
I do believe small flies are on there. I want to say fruit flies. I'm going back to that slide to verify. Yes, fruit flies specifically are on there.
Perfect.
For all three of them, Tekko Pro, Tekko Trio, and Tekko Trio foam. Drain flies as well for all three of them.
Excellent. So how long does the treatment last for? Months or quarterly? Monthly or quarterly?
So these IGR products with the residual that I mentioned, you can see months of effects for flea populations, cockroach populations following that application. And so we do know that it's photostable for quite some time. I guess there's going to be variability with each situation, right? There's going to be different conditions and variables and factors that can affect the breakdown of not just these IGR products, but any of the products that we use, right? Like how much sunlight or light or rainfall, if it is an outdoor application with Tekko Pro. These are things that can affect the residual effectiveness and control for any product. So it depends on the conditions of that particular account, but in general, these do have a pretty good residual for them.
All right, the next question is asking, can you explain how the translocation of hydroprene works?
I don't know if I have a really good technical answer for how that happens. since it is volatile, it does end up after application moving into those other areas near the treatment site. And so it's that volatility that allows it to be effective in other areas beyond the treatment site.
Okay, so here's a question asking, does Tekko Trio foam have to be used in the upright position?
So Tekko Trio foam, along with most of our other aerosols, it does come equipped with a 360-degree valve, and that 360-degree valve, along with the flip-up actuator. You've probably seen that with a lot of our other aerosols in our aerosol family of products. It allows for application flexibility. And so with the straw in the upright position, you can do cracks and crevices very effectively. Straw down, you can do spot treatments very effectively. With a 360-degree valve, it does give you that flexibility of using it in any direction. So it's nice to have, excuse me, that option, especially when you are trying to put the product in these difficult to reach areas, because sometimes we need to be able to turn the can to get the right angle for application. So no, it does not have to be used in the upright position. It does come equipped with that 360-degree valve.
And here's another question on this same product. Heather is asking, did I understand correctly that the foam is okay for restaurants and food service areas?
So it is labeled for food handling establishments, and these products have food areas and non-food areas, and so there's specific instructions for both of those under the food handling establishment section.
Got it. Sorry if this was answered, but can Tekko Trio be mixed for drain treatments? I use Tekko Pro along with Invade Biofoam and Nibor D dust in a foamer Simpson primarily.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one again?
Yeah, they're asking, can Tekko Trio be mixed for drain treatments? I use Tekko Pro along with Invade Biofoam and Nibor D dust in a foamer Simpson primarily.
Yes, so there is drain application directions on the Tekko Trio concentrate as well as the foam labels. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And how do cockroaches spread diseases to humans?
So it's through mechanical transmission as well, very similar to what I mentioned with flies. So cockroaches, of course, are interacting with these bacteria-laden substances in their environments, and so they have the potential to carry those pathogens and microorganisms to our food prep surfaces that we use. And one of the most important aspects of cockroach damage is a result of the fact that they live and harbor in and feed on things in these damp, unsanitary places, such as sewers, garbage disposals, unsanitary damp places around kitchens, bathrooms, and garbage bins. And so they can contaminate our food, they can affect the flavor of our food and the overall smell in the structure, but they are moving those microorganisms around on their bodies as they traipse from place to place.
All right, well, gosh, we're almost at the top of the hour, and it's perfect timing because I'm looking and it looks like all the questions have been answered. So with that, I want to thank Heather and everyone for attending today's webinar. Like I mentioned earlier, later today, you will receive a follow-up email with a short survey and the recording of today's session. So we'd appreciate it if you'd share your feedback with us. And then again, on behalf of our speaker and Veseris, thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.